Hello, Brobs. We're back with A Dream of Dracula in Search of the Living Dead by Leonard Wolff, 1972 book by a professor. I don't know what he's a professor of, probably literature. 7. Dracula's Grandchildren. For this, Mr. Let me unplug this. For this, Mr. Freen was a man who drooped alone but grew vital in a crowd because he used their vitality. He was a supreme unconscious artist in the science of taking the fruits of others' work and living for his own advantage. He vampired unknowingly, no doubt, everyone with whom he came in contact, left them exhausted, tired, listless. Others fed him so that while in a full room he shone, alone by himself and with no life to draw upon, he languished and declined. In the man's immediate neighborhood, you felt his presence draining you. He took your ideas, your strength, your very words, and later used them for his own benefit and aggrandizement. Not evilly, of course. The man was good enough, but you felt that he was dangerous owing to the facile way he absorbed into himself all loose vitality that was to be had. His eyes and voice and presence devitalized you. Never heard that word before. Life, it seemed, not highly organized enough to resist, must shrink from his too near approach and hide away for fear of being appropriated. For fear, that is, of death. Algernon Blackwood. The Enigma. The waste landscape through which the knight rides on his uncanny quest. Maybe I should turn on the light. For what with my whole world wide wandering, what with my search drawn out through years, my hope dwindled into a ghost not fit to cope with that obstreperous joy success would bring. He rides on. There is an oath we do not know about, a need hidden beyond all telling, which makes him ride across a dream of burdocks and thistlestalk, misled by cripples plodding across a gray plain. All around, nothing but plain to the horizon's bound. I might go on, naught else remained to do. So on I went. I think I never saw such starved, ignoble nature. Nothing throve. As for the grass, it grew as scant as hair and leprosy. Thin, dry blades pricked the mud, which underneath looked kneaded up with blood. He passes. One stiff, blind horse, his every bone a stare, stood stupefied. However, he came there, thrust out past service from the devil's stud, then across a black frothing river, along whose banks drenched willows flung them headlong in a fit of mute despair, a suicidal throng. The river which had done them all the wrong, whatever that was, rolled by, deterred no whit. Still, the strange knight rides the landscape, if anything, more horrid than before. On either side of his way there is hideous machinery. Why there? What bad use was that engine for? That wheel, or brake, not wheel, that harrow fit to reel men's bodies out like silk, with all the air of Tophet's tool, on earth left unaware, or brought to sharpen its rusty teeth of steel. The knight, heroic or desperate, rides on. The turf, the trees, the rocks are diseased, poisoned by being. As evening draws on, a great black bird sails into a leaden sky, and he becomes aware of mountains, mere ugly heights and heaps that block his way, or seem to block it, until it comes to him that this was the place, those two hills on the right. What in the midst lay but the tower itself, the round, squat turret, blind as the fool's heart, built of brown stone, without a counterpart in the whole world. It is the end of his journey, Inside the pile of lowering stone, someone or something knows what is to come. The sun is going down. The very hills are conscious that some long awaited dread is ready. They lie, chin upon hand, to see the game at bay. Now stab and end the creature to the heft, not the left. It has been a long, bad ride, a foul, attenuated convulsion in slow motion, and now the specters of all the others who have ridden the same trajectory and failed at the last have gathered to view the last of me, a living frame, for one more picture in a sheet of flame. I saw them and I knew them all, and yet, dauntless, the slug horn to my lips I set and blew. Chilled Roland to the dark tower came. After Dracula, what? In 1970, Lucy Westenra and the mental patient Renfield writhed lasciviously on a New York stage in Leon Katz's Dracula, Sabbat. Lucy, the center of a black mass, arcs her body to receive a desecrated host, which, when set alight, bakes on Lucy's loins. Lucy moans in ecstatic pain. In the same play, Dracula, wearing a dildo, mounts Lucy, his willing worshipper. Shortly after this, Lucy cries, I defy you, Jesus, I, the priestess of this rite, whose body is now both altar and offering, to strike me with lightning, if your power is greater than my lords and masters. Jesus is patient, but later in the play, Arthur, her fiancé, swings the axe that decapitates her on stage. Jack Kroll, praising the play in the October 5th, 1970 Newsweek, called it perfect children's theater because it is the product of a primal sincerity. In 1927, though Dracula gets from Transylvania to London on an airplane, the stage directions for Lucy's behavior are still sedate. When Dracula enters the room, Lucy registers attraction, or Lucy registers thrill. Alternate alternate moods of attraction and repulsion. It was in this Hamilton Dean John L. Balderston production that Bela Lugosi, as Dracula, engaged in the famous staring battle with Van Helsing. Dracula says hypnotically, Come here, but though Van Helsing pales and staggers, he does not come. Sensibly enough, Dracula concludes, Ah, your will is strong, then I must come to you. Van Helsing saves himself at the penultimate moment by holding out a small velvet bag which contains a host, and thus brings terror to the vampire's face as he cries out, Sacrilege! Van Helsing, knowing that the whole moral universe is on his side, replies, I have a dispensation. And I just dispensed some phlegm from my nose, or whatever you call it. 1927 is also the year in which Jean Missler's short story, Les Vampires, Hello, Bravs, was first published in France. Missler's vampire is a semi-comic baron who is badly dressed, has poor horses, and rides them awkwardly. In addition, he has a nez, pointu et cavenu, and an upper jaw in which are set two very long teeth made to frighten children with the Baron Window, to give him his name, quotes the Englishman Guillaume Shakespeare, whom you do not read in France and who has written somewhere, Il y a entre la terre et le ciel beaucoup plus de choses que. Obviously, I don't know French. Lanky and silly though he is, he does not think himself above courting the beautiful Elizabeth, to whom he gives a pretty stuff box in the shape of a bird that sings when open, J'ai du bon tabac. Window snares that Elizabeth will belong to me just the same, and sooner than you believe, the very next day he drowns. But he turns out to be right because, as Elizabeth tells us, he has come searching for me. He waits for me in the cemetery. He will drink my blood. Cornelius Window is an especially disturbing vampire, perhaps because he is so ungainly, so crude and tasteless. He is a commonplace, dirty old man who, as real life sometimes permits, gets the beautiful girl. Window has no tact, even when the stake is being driven through his heart. He taunts the good people who are gathered around his coffin and thanks them for their kindness, and providing him with a stick with which to beat off the dogs when he wanders at night. It's hard to know who gets the last laugh in this story. Window is staked and his body burned for the sake of Elizabeth's soul, but Elizabeth dies, though not before she marries the young chevalier who loves her. Unable to bear her loss, the bridegroom expires not long after. J'ai du bon tabac dans ma tabatière, a song with the purity of silver, that children's voices make purer still. F. Marion Crawford keeps his 1911 tale of a vampire admirably simple, admirably neat, though by now its title seems inevitable. The blood is the life. Here there is a young Calabrian named Angelo, whose miserly father dies, leaving a treasure to be stolen by a couple of journeyman stonemasons who, when they are surprised by Christina in the act of burying their stolen gains, murder her and bury her in the same shallow grave in which they hide the treasure. Out of this grave she rises nightly to prey on Angelo. The young bachelor sees her in his dreams, a spectre whose lips were red when they parted a little and smiled at him. They showed two small sharp teeth. Her visits continue and are so marvelously bewildering that he could not tell whether he was awake or asleep, whether she was alive or dead, but he knew that she loved him. He also knows that on waking he is very weak, and his heart is beating so slow that he was almost like a man fainting. Christina is finally stopped in the usual way, and Angelo goes off to live a more mediocre life in South America. The Blood is the Life is a pretty standard terror tale. Sometimes, among the hundreds of pages of blood fiction I have turned over, there is an unexpected gush of genius, as in P. Schuyler Miller's Over the River. Miller has chosen to let his imagination wander about a vampire's first moments of consciousness as he comes out of the grave and discovers clumsily and slowly what he is. As in Varney the Vampire, Moonlight is the resuscitating agent here. Joe Labatai, the just risen corpse, drank in the moonlight through every pore, and it burned gloriously in him and flowed down through every vein and bone of his body, driving out the dark cold in his flesh. Carefully, carefully, the creature tests his reality. What to eat, for instance. At first, he is able to stay, not quench, his thirst by killing small forest creatures. In a sere and feather-filled scene, he battles an owl. An owl. Pardon. He battles an owl, tearing at its flesh with his teeth and letting the hot, burning blood gush into his parched throat. After the owl, there is a porcupine, then a doe, and then the girl who takes off the crucifix he himself gave her in his other life, to become the final victim of his instructive night. When it was over, the hunger was gone out of his bones. His muscles were no longer cramped and leaden. It is a moment for deeply gratified rest, as the emptied corpse of the loving girl on the floor makes clear. But Labatai has one thing more to learn about being a vampire than he already knows. The girl's brother and two friends find him, fill him with buckshot, and as he lies weakened in the grip of a running stream, one of them drives a stake through his heart. A vampire's life, like that of the rest of mankind, can be nasty, brutish, and short. Lawrence Durrell's Alexandria Quartet is so fluent, so graceful about grief, that its pain slips by us like another silken, corrupt detail. In Balthazar, for instance, there is a carnival evening, in the course of which Pursewarden the poet tells his friends the following vampire tale as a joke. As a young man, Pursewarden says he was the house guest in Venice of an Italian poet, Carlo Negroponte, who was then about 50, frail and rather beautiful. Like a rare kind of mosquito, he was a prince and a diabolist, and his poetry happily married the influence of Byron and Baudelaire. One night, going to the carnival together, the two poets are separated. Pursewarden says, "You know, of course, that carnival is the one time of the year when vampires walk freely abroad." The next morning, Pursewarden, visiting his host, found him pale as death in bed. Negropani confided in his young friend, "I have met the perfect woman, and she proved to be a vampire." Proudly, he displayed his proof. Great bites, like the marks of a weasel's teeth, all over his body. Instead of being horrified, Negroponte was enchanted. "Until you have experienced," he told the young poet, "you have no idea what it is like to have one's blood sucked in darkness by someone one adores." Negroponte had no idea what his mistress looked like, but he told Pursewarden, "Oh, my friend, be happy for me. Now at last, with this vampire's love, I can live again, feel again, write again." Live again was a pitiful irony. In the fall, when Pursewarden returned to Venice, it was just in time to pass a funeral setting out in choppy water by twilight. It was Negroponte's cortege, but the poet had already written his great poem, which began, "Lips not on lips, but on each other's wounds, must suck the envenomed bodies of the loved." Let me repeat, Pursewarden offers his tale as a joke. I haven't made up the rest of the story as yet. I have never been in Venice in my life. There are 4 vampire novels on my desk. 2 amuse me, Theodore Sturgeon's Some of Your Blood, Raymond Rudolph's The Dracula Archives. 1 bores me, Richard Matheson's I Am Legend. 1 frightens me to death, Hans Heinz Ewers's Vampire. I Am Legend has been much praised by science fiction fans, who are pleased with its careful and reasonable scientific explanation of how the whole world has been infected with the disease of vampirism. The vampire disease, a blood ailment, according to Matheson, kills and horribly resurrects all of mankind, with the exception of the book's protagonist, Robert Neville, who was finally destroyed by the triumphant vampires. I find the book's neo-existential prose style of the 50s and its hard-drinking, heavy-smoking, self-pitying, and horny Neville, don't hold it, almost too much to put up with. I suppose bleakness is the natural climate for this kind of literary venture. But a whiskey-stupefied hero, even if he listens to classical music, Bukowski, does not seem to me to be a fair alternative to the new blood drinkers, against whom he is matched. Neville jerks and thrashes, twitches and shakes. He is always muzzy, hungover, or trembling. When he finally takes the pills that will end him as the last of normal mankind, I am not sorry to see him go. I Am Legend is a short book, only 122 pages long, but it moves with paralyzing slowness. Theodore Sturgeon's Some of Your Blood is again a scientific fiction, with the vampire situation given a pretty consistently Freudian treatment. Sturgeon, in a marvelously good-humored, unhorrified way, tells how a couple of army psychologists work on a redneck South Carolina youth with Hungarian ancestry to cure him of his bad blood-drinking habits. If one can get past or forgive the book's chummy man in the street style, Some of Your Blood has some surprisingly poignant moments. George, the young vampire, has a deep love for the outdoors. His respect for woodcraft alone makes him as nearly sympathetic as a blood drinker can be. Particularly touching is his affair with a hulkingly avid farm girl, to whom George is devoted because she permits him to drink her menstrual blood. Even this situation is handled with affectionate delicacy. The most chilling of the 4 books is Hans Heinz Ewer's Vampire. which tells the story of Frank Braun, a patriotic German citizen in New York City during World War I in the years before the United States was involved in the conflict. Braun, devoted to the German cause, is a spectacularly successful public speaker at fundraising meetings, but his eloquence and therefore the sums of money he can raise for an embattled Germany depends on the drafts of blood he takes. Entirely unconsciously, from the throat of his mistress, that young woman who is Jewish offers herself as a willing victim to his thirst because she believes that she is serving the cause of a united destiny for Germans and Jews. Lot, the Jewish mistress, reassuring a penitent Braun tells him, "You look more German. You are going down the path I made for you, the way to the homeland. You are following it with me, for me. My blood flows in you. You have done only what the world does." After the goose stepping and the storm shirts, after the dive bombers and the death camps, Ewer's 1921 novel, crammed as it is with astrology, expensive sexual decadence, and a redeeming blood vision of German Jewish destiny, is particularly unnerving to read. There is a fourth book, and I will go into it in a moment. This morning, I'm going to sneeze. Pardon. This morning, outside the window of the tiny cabin in Inverness, where I am writing these lines in February, an acacia tree suddenly blossomed. When I went out to sniff its fragrance, I stumbled on a dew-slippery log and grasped at what turned out to be a bush of sage. As a result, I got its smell as an unearned increment in the palm of my hand. Tonight, the moon is in Capricorn. 2 weeks ago, it went into eclipse. In Inverness, where scores of young people consult the I Ching, the stars of the tarot cards, the news is out that I am writing a book about vampires, and I gather that there is some anxiety that I may bring down bad karma on the village. I have been offered crunchy granola, bean sprouts for my salad, and homemade yogurt. I accept all gifts, but I have not yet revealed the answer to the question I am most frequently asked: what is your rising sign? There is something very endearing in the humility of an author who, in 1971, will put aside that sum of proud idiosyncrasies that go to make up one's literary style in order to make what purports to be an authentic 19th century history of the House of Dracula from the time of the Voivode Vlad IV. So how you say it, Voivode? In the 15th century to the moment that Bram Stoker in Dracula picks up the family's fortunes. Raymond Rudolph has managed just such a piece of self-denial, and the result is the Dracula Archives, a jeu d'espere, or as Graham Greene might have it, an entertainment that rings some pleasant changes on the Dracula story as Stoker gave it to us. Rudolph, who was born in Germany, has chosen to imitate a prose style that has Edgar Allan Poe for its model, to make a narrative that, with considerable candor, relies on Stoker's materials and methods: letters, Transylvania history, the vampire mythology, the history of the Sekles. Even his characters could be siblings of those in Dracula, for Arminius read Van Helsing, for Lucy, Elizabeth, for Mina, Marguerite, and so on. The entire effect is a little like reading a clever Roman A. Clef, to which, if one is familiar with Tieck, Polidori, Summers, and Bram Stoker, one has all the keys. The Dracula Archives begins with the first of a series of purported documents, this one from a manuscript in an unknown hand, which reads in part... That's not what it reads. That's just my nose. Let the world think me mad or eccentric. Such things are of no account to me. What the doctors may call my lunacy is, in fact, only loyalty to an obsession. One dating from the time that I first read the book which was to change the course of my life, Bram Stoker's Dracula, but of the ancestry and origins of the Count, and of how he came to lead the existence of a vampire. Stoker has said little apart from a few scattered references to the past deeds of the Dracula race. The task of exploring this dark and blood-stained past has fallen to me. Yes, deranged I may be. The summons came to me from beyond the seas and out of the darkness of the centuries. I have answered it and kept faith with that which lies beyond the tomb. Now I stand on the threshold of ultimate triumph. Here are the papers. Who can doubt me? The book goes on in this antique vein as if Rudolph had put his ear, with good effect, to a good deal of Edgar Allan Poe's ground. He writes with the same high-pitched lugubriousness, the same hysterical attention to small detail as he tells an ingenious story in which are fused the fortunes of the infamous line of Dracula with the equally wicked family of Elizabeth Bathory, who lived 100 years after Vlad IV, and is notorious for bathing in the blood of lovely young women. Rudolph traces an intricate genealogy down from two monsters, and then recounts what happens when Stephen Morheim, Vlad's descendant, and Elizabeth Sandor, last of the Bathories. Stephen, helped by instinct and scholarship, conceives that it is in his destiny to find his great ancestor. To that end, he woos, and after a web of circumstances too sticky to unravel here, weds Elizabeth, thus achieving two things. First, he reunites the two dread families, then he gets possession of Elizabeth's property, which includes the old castle in whose vaults the king vampire's body still rests. As the book comes to its end, Stephen's personality is in some fashion transferred into the body of the wicked voivode Vlad, after which Elizabeth is made a vampire. She has just time enough to prey on her former English fiancé before the blessed stake is driven through her heart. Stephen, in Vlad's body, escapes this consummation and lives on to be the Count Dracula who greets Jonathan Harker in the history that such is Rudolph's pleasant conceit. Bram Stoker then writes, that is not quite the end of the matter. The final entry in Rudolph's book is again an extract from the first document from an unknown hand. Here we are told that even Stoker has not quite got things right. Despite the triumph of Van Helsing and his friends, the destiny of the House of Dracula has yet to be completely fulfilled. The honor is mine, and if I fail, then I too shall reign as a lord in the kingdom of darkness. Did the poet not say that it is better to reign in hell than serve in heaven? Not exactly. The words are spoken by Satan, lying beside the lake of fire that washes the shores of hell. As perhaps the unknown hand remembers, Milton never meant them to be anything but a counsel of despair. And that's the end of chapter 7, bruvs. Goodbye, bruvs.